Hello, everyone. I'm sorry, I can't. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I have another fun video today. So today is going to be the what I read in January of 2025. And I love watching these videos. So these are really fun for me to make. They're really great for me to get inspo for my TBR and just books that I want to read coming up next. I love to hear people's thoughts and just kind of see the journey that people go on. And it's also really fun for me to look back and see the books that I read and just kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot that was a month ago. Or this month was a mixed bag for me. I had some really, really good books. I had some books I wasn't too crazy about. I had some in between that were fun, but nothing crazy. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get started. The first book that I read, I actually just barely released a vlog about this, but I read The Maid by Nita Prose. And this was a fun one because this was my first mystery thriller book that I got into, and it was a really good introduction. It wasn't anything too crazy like spice wise or anything like that, but I feel like I was able to experience a fun little story. Was it like the craziest thing I've ever read? No, but I had a good time and the book got me. I think to me, and I know everyone feels different about this, but to me, mystery or thriller, whether it's a movie or a book or whatever, just the genre in general, I enjoy it the most when I get duped, when it tricks me successfully. Knives Out did a really good job with that, where they subvert the expectations and just I didn't really know what to expect. This book got me a little bit. I wasn't totally sure who did it. It was pretty easy to catch on to who the suspicious people were, but how it all played out was not at all what I expected. So that was really fun just to kind of see how it all played out. I think I rated this as a 4 out of 5 just because it wasn't perfect and it wasn't the craziest book I've ever read. I wasn't like die hard, have to finish this within a night, keep me up for hours type book, but it was a good book. Spice level, it's not much, like it has a little bit of a romance. I would say like spice wise 1 or 0 out of 5. Nothing super crazy, but I'll throw that in there just to kind of keep that in there. That was a really good one. It wasn't anything super crazy. Basically, you're following a maid in a hotel and she has really bad social cue, like she doesn't follow social cues very well and just not a lot of EQ or emotional intelligence going on, and so not a very reliable narrator, and that's what makes the book fun, is you're trying to solve a crime through this lens, and it's really fun. Anyways, that is The Maid by Nita Prose. The next book that I read after this one, honestly, I don't know what I was expecting, and it was this book that got me to realize like I really need to read the Goodreads reviews on some of these books because it was not at all what I was expecting. The book was called Bride, and I had seen this recommended on TikToks and in YouTube videos kind of here and there, and all I knew was that a woman, like the book starts out and she's getting married to her enemy in some sort of peace treaty, and they kind of end up getting along, and I knew it was a paranormal vampire romance thing going on, which was new for me. I'm not normally super into those, but I was like, I'll give it a shot. And so I got it, and I'm gonna be real, I liked the premise, I liked the idea, and I liked the narrator, but wow, it took a turn for me. And the moment it started getting spicy, the way that the author wrote the spice was not for me. And I just felt like it all happened so fast. I don't know. I was a little in over my head. I just wasn't expecting that. And I think that's like 80% of it. If I know that that's there going into the book, that's one thing. But I was very much expecting like a spice level 2, maybe 3. And I got like a 4, maybe 5. So it just threw me off, and maybe under a different lens I would have liked it more, but I rated this book a 2 out of 5 just because this was one that I was probably in the mindset that I should have DNF'd it. I just wasn't really feeling it. I didn't like it after like 50%, 50 or 70%, but I just kept reading and I finished it. I will say plot wise, it was decent. It was fun. It's kind of a mystery, who done it, what's going on, mystery, thriller, romance vibes. Paranormal, you've got vampires, you've got werewolves, you've got normal people. They're all kind of intermingling. You've got lots of tenuous peace treaties going on. I liked the main character. I thought she was fun. but overall, just not what I expected. And maybe I'll give it a try a little bit later and I'll like it more now that I know what it is. But I definitely should have read the Goodreads. And I was a little bit better after this book for the rest of the month. I knew a little bit more of what I was getting into, but I rated this one a 2 out of 5. And that is The Bride. Okay, the next book that I read, I think I talked about the first book in my December video, but the next 2 books that I read were books 2 and 3 in the Winter's Curse trilogy. I don't know the actual name of the trilogy, but the first book is The Winter's Curse, and then the second book is The Winter's Crime, and then The Winter's Kiss are the second and third book. And I think I mentioned in that December video that the first book, it was mid. It was okay. Like, I was intrigued, but I wasn't like hooked, if that makes sense. Definitely the second book pulled me in. This is very much a political romance. It's got a lot of politics. If there's paranormal things going on or like fantasy elements, they're very, very subtle. I don't think there are. It's pretty much just political romance at this point. And honestly, I loved it. I thought it was great. This was a rare occasion where I actually quite enjoyed the political aspect of the book. I've talked about this before, but oftentimes, like once you get to the war portion of some big fantasy epic tale, I kind of tune out a little bit and it gets really hard for me to trudge through. But I really liked this one. I feel like it was really artfully done. There was a war, but there was a lot of other things to focus on and a lot of other aspects that made it feel much more bearable. You've got a lot of familial drama going on. You've got families on opposite sides of the war. Just lots of intrigue. It was a good one. And so book 2 and book 3 were really, really, really good. I believe I rated book 2, The Winter's Crime, as a 4 out of 5. And then I rated book 3, The Winter's Kiss, at also a 4 out of 5. These are low spice, no spice romance books. I believe if anything, it's closed door. I would say 1 out of 5 for all of them. And honestly, like I kind of said, I like both. I'm happy with either one. And when it's done really well and you get the connection between the main characters, I'm happy. That's really all I care about. These main characters are really fun because you see them on the same side of the war. You see them on opposite sides of the war. They both go through quite the journey in this story. And so it's really fun to see them develop. It was a lot of fun. So that is The Winter's Crime and The Winter's Kiss. This next book that I read, this was getting back into that kind of mystery thriller. I'm going to call it a little bit of a romance, but not really. It's The Perfect Marriage. And essentially you're following a man and a woman and they're married, and you find out within like the first chapter that the man is having an affair. Before you know it, the mistress is found dead in one of their beds. They have multiple homes. She's dead in one of their homes and he's the prime suspect, as he should be. And his wife happens to be one of the top criminal defense lawyers in DC, and that's where they live. And so his only hope of getting out of this is recruiting his wife to be his lawyer for his case. My oh my, what a story. I honestly, very intriguing. I walked away from that story honestly hating both characters. Hate is a strong word. Let me say, I walked out of that story absolutely convinced that both of the main characters were absolute terrible people. Like, they were terrible people. There was no redeeming qualities for any of them. And it was kind of fun to go back and forth on who's right, who's wrong. It was wild. I have heard, talking with some coworkers about this one. Some of them got really frustrated with some of the plot twists that came along and when they came along. But I personally didn't mind it at all. I think it was a lot of fun. Was it the biggest literary masterpiece I've ever read? No. Was it like an Agatha Christie novel? Probably not. But it was really fun. And sometimes that's what you need. So this was a really fun one. I also enjoyed it. Spice level, I would say 3 out of 5 for this one. You definitely had some spice. It was mostly closed door. You hear some descriptions of, just kind of their thoughts and stuff, but not a lot of super explicit content. So that is that one. And then I believe I rated this one a 4.25 out of 5. And simply because I truly had a good time. And when I was saying there's some books that just get you hooked and some books that have you intrigued, this one, I was genuinely searching for excuses to read. Because this was an audiobook for me. So this one, I was finding time to do the dishes. When my commute to work took a little bit longer, to and from work took a little longer, I wasn't mad at all because that gave me more time to listen to my book. And so that's the kind of book that this was. You can say what you want about if it was the best book in the world or if you liked some of those plot twists or not, but I was genuinely hooked. So it was fun. for me, even if I thought both of the main characters are terrible. So that is the perfect marriage. The next book that I read, I talked about this briefly, I think in my 2024 favorites video. I talked about part 1 for this, but I read Onyx Cage Volume 2. This is by Robin Molly and Ellie Madison, and these two people, they are some of my favorite authors. I love pretty much all the work that they've put out. Everything that I've read by them, I've loved. There's still, I think, one more series that I have yet to read that's on my TBR, and I'm so excited to read it. But Onyx Cage is the male main character's perspective of one of their series. It's called Lachlan Feuds. I also made a video talking about, it was an honest review of the original Lachlan Feuds. You should go watch that if you haven't already. But I loved this book, mostly because I love the main characters. Like, I love character development that you see in the original series. And then in this kind of bonus series, so volume 2 covers books 3 and 4 in the original series, just from his perspective instead. Like, you just get to see a whole other side to this story. You know, when you read it the first time from her perspective, you're like, oh my gosh, that main character, what is he doing? Like, what is he thinking? And then you read it from his perspective and you're like, oh my gosh, what is she thinking? Like, of course this makes sense. And you can see that the characters are flawed. They're not supposed to be perfect. The authors are very intentional about making them flawed and helping them grow, and specifically growing together in their relationship. And it is so powerful. I love it. And it's just so fun. I will say with this volume in particular, because book 4 in the original series does become a dual POV, so you get some of his perspective in that last book. So that means that the last 25 or the last 50% of Onyx Cage Volume 2 is a little repetitive, because about half of the chapters, you've either already read the chapter itself or they've made some tweaks and you're reading it from like a little bit of a different timeline, but it's still very similar, or you've already kind of experienced a lot of that. So it did get a little repetitive for that back half, but it was fun. Just to, like, there were other parts of it that you hadn't experienced. It was still just a good read, and I loved it. So I rated this one a 4.5 out of 5, simply because I love the main characters. The story is so well told. You are engrossed in the universe and you never leave. They do a really good job. It's not like the most action-packed. There's plenty of action, don't get me wrong, but the pacing is phenomenal. So you get the ebbs and the flows that kind of feel like real life. And even with those ebbs and flows, there's never a point when I'm not absolutely hooked. Like, I feel like I was I'm constantly having to read this one. Like, it was really hard for me to focus on anything else. And so I personally, it was a 4.5 star read for me. And I would highly recommend these authors. I'd highly recommend any of their works, but specifically the Lachlan Feuds series. And then if you want to read, you can do a tandem read if you want, but if you want to read the male main characters' perspective, Onyx Cage Volume 1 and Volume 2 to go along with that series as well. So there you go. That was my next read for January. The last book that I read in January was kind of an impulse read. What it was, I usually like to have a book to listen to and a book to read because I drive a far distance for work. And I like to have something to listen to motivate me to clean. I'll be honest, I'm not very motivated to clean otherwise. I like to have a book to listen to and I like to have a book to read. And so I was looking for a book to listen to, and Kindle Unlimited has some books where you can listen and read along. And so I saw this one, it intrigued me. I just decided, why the heck not? And so it's called A Tribute of Fire. And this one is a bit of a romance. It's kind of got like a Greek mythology vibe to it. Not necessarily does it take place in ancient Greece. It takes place in its own universe, but it's got that kind of a vibe to it. Following a girl where she, from a very young age, feels that she can save her people. She lives in a cursed land where, because one of her ancestors did something really, really bad to a neighboring country, her land has been cursed by the goddess. Their land no longer grows any food. They've been essentially starving for the past 1,000 years. They've been barely making it by. And on top of that, as a bit of retribution, the goddess has ordered that every year 2 maidens from her cursed country have to go into this neighboring country that was originally wronged, and they have to try to make it to her temple. And if they make it to the temple, they're safe, but they have to run through the city, and all the men in the city get to chase and try to kill these maidens. And so they just have to be faster and smarter and quicker than like an entire city full of men before they get to the temple. And so she becomes one of these maidens. She is training and doing her best to make it to the temple, and the rest is kind of going on from there. I will say I picked up on the plot twist very, very early on. It was very easy for me to spot the plot twist, but that didn't make it any less fun for me. It was a solid 3-star read for me. I will say this one flirted a lot. There were a lot of like innuendos, and I have a feeling that the sequels will have a potential to be a little bit more spicy. This one I would say probably a 1 or a 2, closer to a 2 out of 5 on that spice scale. Nothing too crazy for the first book. Just because I called the plot twist that happens right at the end, it doesn't mean that it isn't a fun book. And I don't know, it was all right. It was a fun one. If you're looking for something to read, if you're kind of not really sure what you're wanting to read, it was a fun one, and it got me out of a bit of a reading funk that I was in for a few days there. So that was A Tribute of Fire. And that wraps up the books that I read for this month. I know I didn't read, or I'm not super crazy with the amount of books that I read. Unfortunately, this is not my full-time job. I do have a full-time job on top of this, and so I have to sometimes be productive in my days outside of reading, and it breaks my heart, but that is how it is. But anyways, I think, what did I read? 6 books? 7 books? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 7 books ain't that bad, for someone working 40 hours a week with a kid. That's not that bad, If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up and give me a comment, or leave a comment, and give me any suggestions for any books that you love or that you want me to read. I think you're going to start picking up on the books I tend to read, but I'm always open to new suggestions. I'm always open to try new things. I have written down all the books that have been suggested so far. I've put them all on my TBR, and I'm hoping to get to them soon. Please leave any comments or thoughts that you have down below. Any way that you interact with this video helps me a ton. I'm a new channel. I'm just a little baby when it comes to all of this, and so anything that you do to interact helps a ton. But I will see you next time. Thanks so much.